I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped into my parents' house in Austin, Texas. The air in the living room was thick, heavy like the sky before a storm. My mom, Elaine, greeted me with an overly bright smile, and my dad, Robert, gripped my hand unusually tight, as if trying to send me an unspoken message. I'm Claire Anderson, 34 years old, a physical therapist and the owner of Healing Hands Therapy, a business I built from scratch with countless sleepless nights, mounting debt, and profound loneliness. But that evening, as I sat at the familiar wooden dining table, I sensed I was about to face a battle even tougher than the years of starting my practice. My younger sister, Lila, sat across from me. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, the same look she had as a kid when she was about to pull a prank and wait for me to fall into her trap. The table was set extravagantly. Fine china, glittering crystal glasses, and the traditional dishes my mom always made for special occasions. But I knew today wasn't Thanksgiving or Christmas. Something else was being staged. I forced a smile, trying to stay calm as I took my seat. My dad began carving the roast with deliberate precision, while my mom served soup, her voice a pitch higher than usual. I noticed a yellow folder peeking out from under a napkin next to my dad. My heart sank. "How's the clinic doing, honey?" my mom asked, her tone sweet but slightly strained. "It's going well. Patient numbers are up about 20% this quarter," I replied curtly, my eyes still fixed on the folder. Lila let out a small laugh, shrugging. "With that many patients, your tiny waiting room must be packed. I think you need someone who knows how to manage an office. You're only good at the technical stuff, right?" I took a deep breath, forcing down the bite of food stuck in my throat. The pieces in my mind started forming a picture I wished I was wrong about. But when my dad set down his knife and fork, the sharp clink of metal on porcelain confirmed my instincts. "Claire," he said, his voice grave, like he was about to deliver a verdict. "We've discussed this thoroughly. Healing Hands should be a family business, and Lila has a great plan for its future." My heart plummeted. My mom jumped in, her words smooth, almost rehearsed. "Family sticks together, Claire. The clinic will be stronger with loved ones managing it. You can just focus on the patients." Lila seized the moment, pulling a stack of papers from my dad's folder, tossing her hair back with confidence. "I've put together a proposal. I'll handle administration, paperwork, marketing, clients. You just treat patients. In return, I only need 25% of the profits. Fair, right?" Each word from Lila's mouth felt like a stab to my chest. I looked at her beaming face, my parents' expectant gazes, and felt suffocated. This wasn't a family dinner, it was a covert trial, where they'd already decided my role: sign over my hard work and stay silent. In that moment, memories flooded back. I remembered the double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, studying while working to make ends meet. I remembered sending money to help Lila through her first year of college while I ate instant noodles in a closet-sized apartment. I remembered the $187,000 in student loans still looming over me. All that struggle, now brushed aside for my sister's sparkling eyes, a sister who had never truly known hardship. I set my glass down, took a deep breath, and opened the leather briefcase I'd brought. The metallic click of the clasp echoed like a starting gun in my mind. My parents' eyes wavered. I pulled out a stack of documents stamped in bright red and placed them neatly on the table. "Mom, Dad, Lila," I said. "3 weeks ago, I signed a partnership agreement with Texas Healthcare Partners. They now handle all administration and marketing for Healing Hands. The terms are clear. No family members can join management without the board's approval. That board consists of me and 2 partners from the group. In other words, this plan of yours will never happen." Silence engulfed the room. My dad stiffened, trying to maintain composure, but veins pulsed on his forehead. My mom trembled, clutching her napkin. Lila's face flushed, her eyes blazing with anger. You planned this all along?" Lila snapped. "No," I replied slowly. "I just learned to protect what I've sacrificed my youth to build. No more clinking of silverware, no more forced laughter." The dinner had turned into a battlefield, exposing their ambitions and disregard for my efforts. I knew from that moment the rift between me and my family would be hard to mend. But I also knew I'd drawn a necessary line. Healing hands wasn't a cash machine for anyone, not even family. Lila's eyes burned with fury. My dad clenched his fists, and my mom looked at me like I'd betrayed them. But for the first time in years, I felt a weight lift. I had finally spoken up for myself. And that was just the beginning. If you've ever been in a situation where your family placed expectations on you, only to try to take what you've built, you'll understand how suffocating that dinner felt. Please comment below so I know I'm not alone. I believe many of you have felt overlooked or pushed aside from your own achievements. Have you ever felt like a shadow in your own family? Not because you did anything wrong, but because the spotlight always shone on someone else. That night, when I returned to my small Austin apartment after that trial-like dinner, that question haunted me. I sat on the creaky wooden chair by my desk, staring at a mountain of patient files. Outside, the city glowed with lights, its pulse unrelenting. But in my 300-square-foot apartment, memories hit me like a storm, pulling me back to the early days of my journey to becoming a therapist. It started in Denver, right after high school. To enter physical therapy, I faced a grueling, expensive program. I still remember the day I got my acceptance letter. My hands shook so much I could barely hold it. That joy was quickly overshadowed by dread. How would I cover nearly $200,000 in tuition and living expenses? I did the only thing I could. I worked relentlessly. Days were for classes, nights for waitressing at the hospital cafeteria. Some days I reviewed anatomy notes while clearing trays. Back at my cheap rental, I'd collapse on the bed, too exhausted to take off my shoes. During exam weeks, I spread books across a tiny dining table, next to a box of instant ramen and cheap coffee. That table became an impromptu bed when I couldn't afford rent and had to crash in the school's therapy lab. I slept on the same treatment tables I practiced on, using disposable patient sheets as blankets. In my memories, birthdays didn't involve cakes or balloons. On my 22nd birthday, in my third year of college, I called home, hoping for a warm wish. Instead, my mom rushed through the call. "We're busy planning Lila's 19th birthday party. The whole family's preparing. I'll call you back." I stood frozen, the phone burning in my hand. My birthday faded into a shadow on the calendar, eclipsed by my sister's celebration. I told myself, it's fine, I'm grown, but the sting of being overlooked buried itself deep. On graduation day, I wore my black gown and gold honor cord, earned as a top student. I hoped to see pride in my parents' eyes. But they arrived late, and instead of hugging me, my dad handed my cap to Lila, joking, "Try it on, you look like a star student." They snapped photos of Lila in my cap, laughing. Meanwhile, I, fresh off the stage, stood to the side, clutching my diploma that no one bothered to glance at. I wondered, were my achievements too small? Or did they simply never care to notice? Years later, I scraped together loans and worked nonstop to open my small clinic in Austin. On opening day, only 3 young staff members and a few close colleagues showed up to celebrate. My parents stopped by for 15 minutes, glanced around, and said casually, "It looks like a real clinic." Then they left to attend Lila's friend's wedding. That night I sat alone in the tiny reception area, a full glass of champagne in hand, my eyes stinging. I'd just launched my life's dream, but to my family it wasn't worth remembering. Despite the dismissals, I kept helping. When Lila struggled with rent in college, I sent her $200 from my meager savings. When my parents needed arthritis medication, I handled it. I went without meals or new clothes, just to ensure they didn't lack. But that support was never acknowledged. They saw it as my duty. To them, I was always the smart but bland sister, while Lila was the center of every praise and favor. Sitting in my Austin apartment, those memories crashed over me like waves. I realized I'd become invisible in my own family. It wasn't for lack of effort or love, but my achievements were always overshadowed by my sister's glow. I bit my lip, tears spilling over. But amid that pain, a thought sparked. Maybe that invisibility had forged the strength I had today. If I hadn't been overlooked, I might never have learned to fight for my worth. That night, I sat down to write a new plan for my clinic, each word a vow. I would never let anyone diminish me again. My story might remind you of your own. Have you ever felt overlooked despite giving your all for your family? Have you stood on the sidelines while someone else got all the praise? If you find my story compelling, please comment why. If not, comment N to let me know. Do you know the feeling of being dismissed your whole life, only to reach a moment where you have to lay bare the truth to protect yourself? That's exactly what happened in my parents' house, right after that tense dinner. The heavy atmosphere didn't lift with the half-eaten plates. The golden chandelier light made me feel like I was under scrutiny in a courtroom, with my parents and Lila as the judges. Everything felt foreign, though this was the home I grew up in. My dad leaned his elbows on the table, his eyes cold. "Claire, you're overreacting. This is about family. We only want what's best for you." I took a long breath. Anger surged inside me, but I knew emotions alone wouldn't suffice. I needed the truth. I opened my briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of neatly clipped documents. "Mom, Dad, Lila, if we're talking about the truth, let's look at this." I placed the stack on the table, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I slid the first sheet toward my parents. "This is a list of Lila's work at the clinic. 15 missed appointments, leaving patients waiting hours or leaving. 23 unexplained discounts, 8 of them for her friends. 31 insurance coding errors that nearly got us audited." My mom paled, glancing at Lila. Lila bit her lip, trying to stay composed. "Those were just early mistakes. I was new, I wasn't used to it. You're blowing this out of proportion," Lila snapped, her voice sharp. I looked straight into her eyes, unflinching. "You didn't mess up because you lacked skill. You messed up because you thought rules didn't apply to you. You treated the job like a game and the patients as your playground." Lila's face flushed, her hands trembling. My dad clenched his jaw. "Enough, Claire. Don't make a big deal out of this." Lila was just trying to help. I didn't answer him right away. I pulled out another spreadsheet, dense with numbers, and placed it in front of them. "This details the last 3 years, over $40,000 in free treatments for our family. Dad, your shoulder rehab. Mom, your heel therapy. Lila, dozens of massages and alignments before your trips. I did it all without charging a cent." My mom stammered, her voice breaking. You did that because you love us." "Yes, Mom," I cut in, my eyes blurring with suppressed tears. "I did it out of love. But love doesn't mean I have to keep being taken advantage of. While I ate instant noodles to pay off debt, you treated my efforts as a given, an endless gift you didn't need to thank me for." The room fell silent. I could hear the clock ticking. My dad's voice was low, trying to regain control. "Claire, you're letting success pull you away from family. We've always supported you." I let out a dry laugh, tinged with bitterness. "Supported? When I graduated, you showed up late and took pictures of Lila in my cap. When I opened the clinic, you stopped by for 15 minutes before leaving. I waited years for one word of recognition. Is that support?" Lila slammed her hand on the table. "You always play the victim. I just wanted to share your success. Why do you treat me like the enemy?" I looked at my sister, her familiar face now twisted with anger. I felt pity, sadness, but above all, resolve. "No, Lila, you didn't want to share. You wanted to take, and I won't let that happen." I stood up, my gaze sweeping over my parents and sister. The room was quiet, only my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "From today," I said, each word deliberate, "my career has no room for anyone to elbow in. Healing Hands is the result of my blood, sweat, and years of endurance. I won't let it become the family's piggy bank." My mom burst into tears, my dad shot up from his chair, and Lila stared at me with a mix of hatred and hurt. I knew I'd just severed a long-standing bond, but if I didn't, I'd be forever trapped in the shadow of their dismissal. Leaving my parents' house that night, I felt both relief and pain. Relief because I'd finally spoken the truth. Pain because I saw the collapse in my mom's eyes, the anger in my dad's, and the devastation on Lila's face. Driving through Austin's streets back to my small apartment, my heart felt empty. Maybe from now on, my family ties would never be the same. But in that moment, I knew I had truly grown. Have you ever had to confront your family to protect your hard work? It's one of the toughest challenges, not just a battle of reason, but a wound to the heart. If you want to hear more stories and struggles like mine and relate to them, check out my previous videos on this channel. Have you ever seen someone who was once proud, who thought they were above everyone, collapse right before your eyes? That was my sister Lila on a rainy night in Austin, an image I'll never forget. After our fiery confrontation at my parents' house, I limited contact with Lila. I heard bits and pieces from mutual friends. She was teaming up with some friends to launch an online fashion store. Her social media was full of glamour, photo shoots in rented studios, sparkling dresses, and promises of high-end fashion at affordable prices. At first, I gave a bitter smile. Lila had no business experience or the patience to see things through, but she believed her charm and smile would make everything fall into place. Then I got the news. They'd sunk nearly $60,000 into advertising, with inventory piling up in a rented warehouse and more returns than sales. When the money ran dry, her friends vanished one by one. They'd clinked glasses with her, but now blocked her number, leaving her drowning in debt. That night, Austin was drenched in rain. I'd just finished a late shift at the clinic, exhausted, and returned to my apartment. As I was about to close the door, I heard the scrape of suitcase wheels on wet pavement. There was Lila. Her hair was matted, mascara streaked from rain and tears. Her thin jacket was soaked, her hands trembling as she gripped the suitcase handle. The eyes that once sparkled with confidence were now empty, desperate. "Claire," her voice was hoarse. I have nowhere else to go." I froze. The sister who'd challenged me, who'd screamed that I was selfish, now stood shivering at my doorstep like a lost child. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to shut the door and let her face the consequences, but memories flooded back. The nights I sent her money for rent, the times I took on family responsibilities so she could live like a princess. I'd loved her deeply, even if that love was always taken for granted. I sighed and stepped aside. "Come in, you're soaked." Lila burst into sobs, her cries catching in her throat. She dragged her suitcase into my tiny apartment, a space with just an old sofa, a dining table, and a few bookshelves. It was my simple world, a stark contrast to the glitz she'd flaunted online. As she sat on the sofa, I handed her a towel and a mug of hot tea. After a while, she calmed down and whispered, "I owe the bank, and friends. I thought I could turn it around, but they all left. No one answers my calls. No one helps. I have no one but you." Her confession pierced my chest. For years, I'd longed for her to admit the truth. But when it came, I didn't feel triumphant, just heartbroken. "Lila, you thought a smile and luck would lead to success, but life doesn't work that way," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You need to learn responsibility." She bowed her head, tears streaming down. I saw a child, stripped of pride for the first time. I pulled her suitcase over and opened it. Inside were a few clothes mixed with unsold inventory dresses. I closed it and looked her in the eye. "You can stay here for a while, but listen carefully. I won't pay your debts. I'm giving you a place to sleep and a chance to start over." Lila looked up, her eyes red and trembling. You're letting me stay? After everything I said and did?" I gave a small smile, a lump rising in my throat. "Because you're still my sister. But this time I'm not saving you with money. I'm saving you by making you change." Lila broke down, collapsing into my shoulder. The apartment filled with the sound of rain pattering outside, and her muffled sobs, a once proud sister now humbled. In that moment, I realized this was a turning point. What I wanted wasn't to see Lila fall, but to see her ready to start again. Her words, "I have nowhere else to go," weren't just a plea for help. They were an admission that her chosen path had led to a dead end. I hugged her, no longer angry, only determined. This time I'd use compassion to change her life, not temporary bailouts. What would you do when the person who hurt you most comes begging for help? Would you reach out or turn away? After that rainy night when Lila showed up with her soaked suitcase, I chose to open the door. But opening the door didn't mean letting her slide back into old habits. I knew if I didn't set boundaries, she'd return to her old ways. The next morning, when Lila woke up on the old sofa, I had a piece of paper waiting on the dining table. She frowned as she read, "Find a part-time job this week. List all debts and plan repayments. Cut spending. No shopping, no parties, no luxury check-ins. Stay in the apartment only if you follow these rules." "Are you serious? Me, working some low-level job? What will my friends think?" Lila grumbled, her voice full of defiance. I looked her in the eye. Your friends ditched you when you went broke. You're still worried about what they think? What you need isn't pride, it's responsibility. She pursed her lips and tossed the paper onto the table. I didn't argue further. I knew she'd have to choose, keep her arrogance or start anew. 3 days later, I took Lila to the Austin Community Rehabilitation Center where I'd volunteered as a student. I asked the director to give her an entry-level role, registering patients, assisting with scheduling, cleaning equipment. When she heard her tasks, Lila's face flushed. "You're making me a janitor?" I replied simply, "This is a job. Everyone starts small. If you look down on it, you'll never learn to respect others' efforts." Her first day, Lila sulked the entire time. She was used to compliments and glamorous photos, not wiping down therapy bars, organizing crutches, or logging appointments. But I stayed out of it. I let her stumble, knowing sometimes falling is the deepest lesson. That evening, she came home reeking of sanitizer, her back aching from lifting equipment. "Some nights," she snapped, "I hate that place. The old patients keep complaining and I'm not learning anything." I just handed her a warm towel and let her think. I believed time would teach what words couldn't. Then one afternoon, I visited the center. I saw Lila sitting beside an elderly man using a walker. His voice trembled. "Thank you. Because of you, I took 3 extra steps today." Lila's face softened, her eyes wavering. It was the first time she felt the joy of her effort making a difference. A week later, the center's director told me, "Your sister got our grumpiest patient to smile today. That guy never praises anyone." I rushed over. There was Lila holding an elderly woman's hand, patiently encouraging her to lift a stiff arm post-stroke. When the session ended, the woman gripped Lila's hand, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You helped me feel like I can recover." In that moment, Lila broke down. No more anger, no more pride, just tears of realization, understanding the value of giving, not just taking. On the way home, Lila was quiet. Then, softly, she said, "Claire, I'm sorry. All this time, I thought being pampered was enough, but today I felt I did something worthwhile." I looked at her, relief washing over me. I knew the road was long, but she'd taken her first step. That night, Lila spread a thin blanket on the sofa but didn't sleep right away. She stared at the debt repayment plan I'd written, her eyes no longer panicked but determined. She whispered, almost to herself, "I'll do it. Even if it takes 7 years, I'll do it." I turned away, hiding a smile and a tear. After all these years, I finally saw my sister grow up. Maybe love isn't pulling someone out of the mud without letting them walk. True love is standing beside them, handing them a stick, and letting them find their own footing. Do you believe a year can change an entire family? If someone had asked me that 12 months ago, I'd have shaken my head. But today, standing in the Grand Hall at the opening of the new Healing Hands Therapy Center in Austin, I know the answer is yes. A year ago, I had a small clinic with a handful of staff. I juggled everything, treating patients, handling insurance paperwork. Today, Healing Hands is a modern center with 15 treatment rooms, a team of nearly 20, and a reputation spreading through the community. As I stepped into the main lobby, I looked up at the gleaming new sign. But beside it, I kept the old wooden one, a relic of those early grueling days. It reminds me that every success today was built on sweat and tears, not magic. Among the crowd of guests, I saw Lila bustling about, handing out flyers and guiding people to their seats. No more flashy dresses or designer bags. She wore a volunteer's t-shirt, her hair tied back, a genuine smile on her face. That sight tugged at my heart. I remembered the rainy night she showed up at my door, tears mixing with rain. A year later, she was still here, not as a burden, but as a true contributor. In the distance, I saw my parents, Robert and Elaine, walk in. This time, they arrived on time, dressed formally, but not ostentatiously. When our eyes met, I caught a flicker of hesitation in theirs. After the ribbon cutting, as guests toured the center, my dad approached, his voice slow. "Claire, we were wrong. Wrong for overlooking you, for only seeing what Lila needed and not what you sacrificed." My mom took my hand, her eyes wet. "My girl, I'm sorry. I left you to struggle alone for too long." I stood still. I'd yearned for these words for years. Now, hearing them, I felt warmth and pain intertwined. Finally, I nodded and said softly, I just needed you to understand. The ceremony's climax came when the MC invited Lila and me to speak. I was about to decline for her, but Lila grabbed my hand and whispered, Let me speak this time, not take. I nodded. Before hundreds of people, Lila held the mic, her voice trembling but firm. Today, I'm not here to demand, but to thank. Over the past year, my sister taught me the greatest lesson of my life. Love isn't about pampering, it's about making the ones you love strong enough to stand on their own. The room fell silent. I saw tears in many eyes. My own had been falling since I don't know when. I pulled Lila into a hug and whispered, Family isn't about taking, it's about growing together. My parents joined us on stage, wrapping us in their arms. For the first time in years, our family stood together, not for gain, but for true connection. The applause roared, but to me the most important sound was the calm beat of my own heart. I know we can't erase the past with one hug, but today was a start of compassion, of learning to see and value each other. When the ceremony ended, I sat alone in my new office. Through the glass window, I saw staff snapping photos, patients smiling, and Lila handing out water. I realized my success wasn't just a bigger center. It was keeping my heart soft despite the pain. Compassion didn't weaken me, it made me stronger, and that compassion brought my family back together. Perhaps the greatest lesson I've learned isn't how to run a therapy center, but how to heal the invisible wounds in my family. I understand now that true love isn't pampering or taking from each other. It's helping those you love find the strength to stand tall. My journey with Lila proves that anyone can change, given the chance and guided with patience. And my parents, after years of overlooking me, finally learned to see and value what I'd been through. If you feel dismissed or abandoned, remember, you have the right to set boundaries and the right to choose compassion when your heart is strong enough. That's true growth. Thank you for joining me in this story. If this journey resonates with you, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel to hear more everyday stories filled with meaningful lessons.